There comes a moment in a woman's life when she realizes that her strength alone cannot carry the weight of her battles. She has tried everything, cried through lonely nights, pushed herself beyond exhaustion, and yet life's storms still raged against her. When a woman makes the decision to lay it all at the feet of the Almighty, when she says, "Lord, I cannot, you can," something supernatural begins to happen. When a woman gives it all to God, she does not just hand him her burdens, she hands him her future, her scars, her brokenness, and her dreams. And in return, God gives her something the world cannot take away: divine strength, peace that passes all understanding, crown of purpose that outshines every past mistake. The world may have labeled her as not enough, but when she surrenders, heaven calls her chosen, favored, and equipped. People may see her as fragile, but God sees her as his warrior. They may remember her failures, but God remembers her faith. And that faith becomes the fuel that ignites transformation. When a woman surrenders, she rises with authority. She walks differently because she knows she is not walking alone. She speaks differently because her words carry the weight of heaven. She loves differently because her love is no longer chained to disappointment. It flows from the endless well of God's love. And let me tell you this, when a woman gives it all to God, she becomes unstoppable. Not because of who she is, but because of who he is in her. She discovers that rejection was just redirection. She learns that pain was preparation. She sees that every tear she shed watered the soil for her destiny to grow. So if you have been carrying the load, if you have been wrestling with life's weight, if you have been questioning your worth, let today be the day you surrender it all. Put it in his hands. Because when you do, your weakness becomes his strength, your loss becomes his testimony, and your life becomes his masterpiece. There comes a point in life when holding on becomes heavier than letting go. We live in a world that teaches us to fight for control, to manage every outcome, push ourselves until our strength runs dry. But there is a deeper truth that many overlook. Real power is not found in holding on, but in letting go. Transformation begins the moment we decide to surrender. Surrender is not weakness. It is not giving up. It is not waving a white flag in defeat. No, surrender is the courageous act of placing everything into the hands of the one who holds the universe together. It is the acknowledgement that my wisdom is limited, but his wisdom is infinite. It is the recognition that my strength may falter, but his strength never fails. When a woman surrenders, she begins to shed the weight of unnecessary battles. The disappointments, the regrets, the questions that have haunted her, they no longer sit on her shoulders like a heavy cloak. Instead, she exchanges them for peace, a peace that makes no sense to those around her, but becomes the anchor for her soul. Transformation does not happen overnight. It begins in the moment of surrender. It begins when she whispers in the quiet of her room, "Lord, cannot do this on my own." And heaven leans down to meet her there. That whisper becomes the starting point of a new chapter not written by her struggles, but authored by God's grace. Surrender unlocks healing. For years, she may have carried wounds that no one could see, wounds of rejection, betrayal, heartbreak, or failure. She tried to cover them with smiles, business, with pretending that everything was fine. But when she surrenders, those wounds are no longer hidden. They are placed in the hands of the healer. In his hands, scars are not erased, but transformed. They become marks of survival, evidence that she endured and that she overcame, not by her might, by his power. Surrender unlocks clarity. When we try to control everything, our vision becomes clouded with fear and doubt. We question every step, second-guess every decision, and exhaust ourselves with what-ifs. But when she surrenders, her eyes open to see beyond the present pain. She sees that rejection was not the end, but redirection. She sees that closed doors were not punishment, but protection. She sees that even the valleys had purpose, shaping her for the mountaintop that awaits. Surrender unlocks freedom. Many people live chained to the opinions of others, to the pressure of perfection, to the guilt of past mistakes. But when she surrenders, those chains break. She no longer has to prove herself to anyone because she knows that her worth is not tied to approval. It is secured in her Creator. She no longer has to fear the future because she trusts the one who holds it. She no longer has to replay the failures of yesterday. because she knows her past does not disqualify her purpose. It prepares her for it. Transformation is not about becoming someone new. It is about becoming who she was always created to be. Surrender strips away the false identities, the labels placed on her by people who did not understand her journey. It removes the mask she wore to survive in environments that could not handle her authenticity. Pulls down the walls she built to protect herself, but that also blocked her blessings. And in the place of those false coverings, surrender clothes her in truth, strength, and purpose. The beauty of surrender is that it shifts the weight. She no longer walks alone. She no longer fights battles with her bare hands. She no longer cries into pillows, believing no one hears. Because when she surrenders, she steps into divine partnership. Her weakness is exchanged for his strength, her confusion for his guidance, her emptiness for his fullness. And let me tell you, this transformation is evident. You cannot encounter God in surrender and remain the same. Walk changes. She carries herself with quiet confidence because she knows who walks with her. Her words change. They drip with wisdom because she no longer speaks from fear but from faith. Her presence changes. People notice a light in her, a peace that radiates even in the midst of chaos. That light is not her own. It is the reflection of the one she surrendered to. Some may not understand her change. They may question why she no longer fights the way she used to, why she no longer entertains certain conversations, why she no longer chases what once drained her. But surrender changes appetites, it shifts desires. It makes her hunger for what matters and lose taste for what doesn't. Surrender unlocks transformation because it places her life back into the hands of the one who created it. The potter knows how to shape the clay. The author knows how to write the story. The shepherd knows how to guide the sheep. And the father knows how to love his daughter back into wholeness. The world tells her to hustle harder, to grind until she collapses, to prove her worth through achievements. But surrender says, rest in me, watch what I will do. It does not mean she stops working, but it means she stops worrying. It does not mean she stops moving. It means she stops striving. She flows with grace instead of forcing things into place. She trusts the timing instead of trying to manipulate the outcome. Transformation through surrender is not always easy. It requires trust. It requires patience. It requires the courage to let go of what feels comfortable, even if it is painful. But what she gains in return is worth every tear, every risk, every unknown. Because in surrender, she finds the strength to rise. She discovers the beauty of becoming. She walks into the fullness of her destiny. And so today, if the weight you are carrying feels unbearable, if the path ahead feels unclear, if your heart feels too broken to go on, hear this: surrender is not the end of your story. It is the beginning. It is the moment heaven rewrites your narrative. It is the doorway to healing, to clarity, to freedom, to purpose. When you surrender, you do not lose. You gain. You gain peace. You gain strength. You gain identity. You gain transformation. And when people look at you after you've surrendered, they won't see the woman who is broken, lost, or burdened. They will see the woman who was transformed, renewed, unstoppable, because surrender unlocked her destiny. There comes a time in every woman's life when she realizes that the names, the labels, titles the world has placed upon her do not reflect who she truly is. For too long, she may have lived under the shadow of someone else's opinion, carrying the weight of words that cut too deep and lingered too long. Perhaps she was called not enough. Perhaps she was branded by her failures, her past, her shortcomings. Perhaps she believed that the whispers that told her she was too broken, too scarred, too late, too ordinary. There is a truth that changes everything. Her identity is not determined by the world around her. It is redefined by heaven. When heaven speaks over a woman, it cancels every false identity that has ever been spoken over her. The names given to her by hurtful voices lose their power. She once believed dissolve in the presence of divine truth. Heaven does not call her by her mistakes. It calls her by her purpose. Heaven does not remind her of where she has been. It declares where she is going. Heaven does not define her by her scars. It crowns her with honor and reminds her that she was chosen before the foundation of the world. To be redefined by heaven means to step into the reality that God's word over her is greater than man's opinion of her. People may see her through the lens of limitation, but God sees her through the lens of destiny. People may reduce her to her past, but God magnifies her future. People may identify her by what went wrong, but God identifies her by what He has made right. Her identity is not locked in the chains of yesterday. It is sealed in the promises of eternity. When a woman's identity is redefined by heaven, she begins to walk differently. She carries herself with a quiet confidence, not because she has never been broken, but because she knows that her brokenness has been redeemed. She no longer hides her scars. She allows them to tell a story of survival and transformation. She no longer silences her voice. She speaks with authority because she knows heaven backs every word of truth she declares. She no longer fears rejection because she knows she is already accepted, already chosen, already loved. This redefinition does not erase her past, but it changes how her past defines her. Where others see failure, heaven sees foundation. Where others see weakness, heaven sees strength perfected. Where others see shame, heaven sees a testimony in the making. A woman who has been redefined by heaven understands that everything she has endured was part of shaping the woman she was always meant to become. Her new identity is not rooted in her performance, but in His promise. It is not built on her perfection, but on His grace. It is not fragile, shifting with the seasons of life, but steadfast, anchored in the unchanging love of God. When the storms come, and they will come, she does not lose herself because her identity is not built on sand, but on rock. She is not defined by the instability of circumstance, but by the eternal word that cannot be shaken. And let me tell you this, when heaven redefines her, the world takes notice. They may not understand the change. They may question why she no longer entertains certain environments, why she no longer tolerates toxic relationships, why she no longer chases validation from empty sources. What they do not understand is that a woman who knows who she is in heaven cannot be manipulated on earth. She cannot be controlled by fear because she is secure in love. She cannot be swayed by pressure because she is anchored in purpose. She cannot be diminished by criticism because she has already been elevated by grace. Her identity redefined by heaven gives her courage. She dares to dream again. She dares to step into spaces she once thought were too big for her. She dares to believe that her life carries meaning, even if others tried to convince her otherwise. She dares to rise not in arrogance, but in assurance that she is not moving on her own strength, on divine assignment. This redefinition also gives her freedom. She no longer needs to compare herself to anyone else because she understands that heaven does not create duplicates, it creates originals. Her uniqueness is her strength, not her weakness. She no longer despises her differences. She embraces them as marks of divine design. She is free from the exhausting race of trying to keep up because she understands that her pace is guided by the one who set her path. And when her identity is redefined, she becomes unstoppable because she is flawless, but because she is fearless, not because she never falls, but because she never stays down, not because life becomes easy, because she knows who she is even when life becomes hard. She wears resilience like armor and faith like fire. She walks into rooms not asking for permission to exist, but carrying the confidence that she belongs because heaven has already validated her presence. Her identity, redefined by heaven, also shifts the atmosphere around her. Her children notice the change. Her friends feel the difference. Her workplace sees the light she carries. She does not even have to announce it. Her life testifies of it. The peace she exudes, the wisdom she carries, the strength she embodies, these are all reflections of the transformation that took place when she stopped listening to the voices of earth and started embracing the voice of heaven. So many women have lived far beneath who they were created to be because they believed lies instead of truth. But when heaven redefines her, lies are silenced. Shame loses its grip. Fear has no authority. She rises into her true identity, and the world is never the same. And here is the most powerful truth of all. Heaven does not just give her a new name, it reveals her original name. The name that was spoken over her before she was formed in her mother's womb. The name that reflects her divine purpose, her calling, her assignment. Heaven does not redefine her into something foreign. It reintroduces her to who she always was in the heart of God, So if she has been walking under the weight of false names, if she has been trapped by the chains of misidentification, if she has been shrinking herself to fit into molds that were never made for her, it is time for her to rise. It is time for her to shed those labels. It is time for her to step into the fullness of who she is, because her identity is not in the hands of people. It is not in the record of her past. It is not in the approval of society. Her identity is redefined by heaven. And when heaven redefines a woman, there is no force on earth or in hell that can strip it away. She becomes untouchable in her worth, unstoppable in her calling, and unshakable in her faith. She walks boldly into her future, not because she knows every step, but because she knows who walks beside her. She is no longer bound by who she was. She is empowered by who she is. And who she is chosen, loved, called, and crowned by heaven. Will always present moments that try to crush the human spirit. Storms will come without warning. Pain will visit without invitation. Loss, betrayal, disappointment, and heartbreak have a way of shaking the very foundation of our lives. There is something that holds us together when everything else seems to fall apart. It is faith. And when faith is alive within a person, it fuels resilience. It becomes the engine that keeps her moving forward, even when everything around her tells her to stop. Faith is not pretending that the storm is not real. It is not denial of pain or difficulty. Faith is the inner conviction that even though the storm rages, it will not consume her. It is the assurance that though the valley is deep, she is not walking it alone. It is the strength to look at broken pieces and still believe that something beautiful can come out of them. That kind of faith produces resilience, the ability to bend but not break, to fall but rise again, to weep but not lose hope. Resilience is not born in comfort. It is forged in fire. It is tested when the night stretches longer than expected, when prayers seem unanswered, when doors remain closed. Without faith, those seasons can crush a soul. But with faith, those seasons become classrooms. They teach her patience. They teach her endurance. They teach her that her survival is not rooted in her own strength, but in the strength of the one who carries her. Faith fuels resilience because faith gives vision. When her natural eyes see only obstacles, faith allows her to see possibilities. When people around her say, "It's over," faith whispers, "This is only the beginning." When her heart feels like giving up, faith reminds her of promises that cannot fail. With that vision, she presses forward, knowing that what is ahead is greater than what is behind. Resilience is not about being untouched by pain. It is about refusing to be defined by it. A woman with faith understands that her scars are not symbols of defeat, but of survival. Every tear she cried watered the ground for her future harvest. Every season of loss prepared her for a greater gain. Every rejection was a setup for redirection. Faith transforms wounds into wisdom, and wisdom strengthens resilience. The world often admires resilience, but rarely understands its source. True resilience is not just a matter of personality or willpower. It is not something a person simply decides to have one morning. True resilience comes from the deep well of faith. It is faith that whispers to her in the midnight hour, "You will make it." It is faith that steadies her when fear tries to paralyze her. It is faith that gives her the courage to stand tall after being knocked down. Without faith, resilience runs dry. With faith, resilience becomes unshakable. Faith fuels resilience because it gives meaning to the struggle. Pain without purpose is unbearable, but faith reveals that even pain has a place in the story. What tried to destroy her will develop her. What tried to silence her will strengthen her voice. What tried to bury her will become the soil for her growth. With that perspective, she does not quit when life gets hard. She learns to lean into the difficulty, trusting that something greater is being worked out behind the scenes. When faith fuels resilience, she learns how to rise in ways that confuse the enemy. She may have been pushed down, but she keeps getting back up. She may have been told no, but she keeps pressing until she finds the door marked eyes. She may have walked through seasons of loneliness, but she never walks without hope. Her resilience is not arrogance. It is testimony. It says to the world, "I am still here, not because I never fell, because I never stayed down." A faith teaches her that every ending is not destruction, but transition. When one chapter closes, faith fuels resilience to wait for the next one. When a dream seems shattered, faith gives her the patience to see how the pieces will be reassembled. When she is tempted to despair, faith reminds her that the story is not over. That knowledge gives her the power to endure what others could not. It gives her the strength to walk through fire and come out refined instead of consumed. A resilient woman of faith becomes an unshakable force. She does not deny the reality of her struggles, but she refuses to let them have the final say. She does not minimize her battles. She maximizes her belief in the God who fights for her. She may cry, but she does not quit. She may stumble, but she does not stop. She may lose some battles. She will win the war because faith has already declared the victory. Resilience fueled by faith transforms how she faces opposition. She no longer sees obstacles as roadblocks, but as opportunities. She no longer sees delays as denial, but as divine preparation. She no longer sees loss as the end, but as the beginning of something new. Faith reshapes her perspective, and perspective empowers her to endure. And when others watch her life, they marvel. They cannot understand how she keeps standing after so many storms. They cannot explain how she keeps smiling after so many tears. They cannot figure out how she keeps pressing forward after so many setbacks. The answer is simple. Faith fuels her resilience. It is not her strength they are seeing. It is the strength of God shining through her. Faith does not always remove the mountain, but it gives her the resilience to climb it. Faith does not always stop the storm. It gives her the resilience to withstand it. Faith does not always erase the pain, but it gives her the resilience to endure it until healing comes. Every time she survives another battle, her resilience grows stronger and her faith grows deeper. So if life has left her weary, if trials have left her questioning, if battles have left her broken, she must remember this resilience is not born of her own might. It is born of faith. Faith rises, so does she. She may bend, but she will not break. She may fall, but she will not stay down. She may struggle, but she will not surrender. Because faith fuels resilience, and resilience carries her into destiny. There comes a time when a woman realizes that the very things life tried to silence in her are the very things God intends to use. For too long, her voice may have been dismissed, overlooked, or diminished. For too long, her steps may have been hindered by fear, insecurity, or the weight of expectation. When God steps in, everything changes. He does not just restore what was broken. He empowers her voice and her walk. He breathes life into her words and strength into her steps. And suddenly, the woman who once felt invisible begins to stand with undeniable presence. God empowers her voice. It no longer trembles with uncertainty. It carries authority. Her voice is no longer an echo of other people's opinions. It becomes a sound of clarity and conviction. Her words shift from self-doubt to declarations of faith. She no longer whispers from the corners of insecurity. She speaks with boldness because she knows heaven stands behind every word spoken in truth. Her voice becomes a weapon. It becomes a tool of healing, a source of encouragement, a declaration of victory. She speaks life over her children, over her family, over her community. She speaks peace into chaotic situations, declaring that storms will not last forever. She speaks faith in the face of impossibility, refusing to bow to the lies of defeat. And because God empowers her voice, her words do not fall to the ground empty. They carry weight, they carry authority, they carry destiny. It is not only her voice that is empowered. God also strengthens her walk. For years, she may have stumbled under the weight of shame, guilt, or fear. For years, her steps may have been slow, hesitant, unsure. But when God empowers her walk, He gives her stability. She no longer walks with her head bowed in defeat. She walks upright in confidence. She no longer drags her feet in exhaustion. She walks with renewed energy, fueled by divine strength. Her walk becomes a testimony. Every step forward declares that she has survived. Every step forward speaks louder than the voices that told her she would never make it. Every step forward is evidence that grace carried her where strength could not. And because her walk is empowered, she does not just move aimlessly. She moves with direction. Her steps are ordered, guided, and aligned with her purpose. When God empowers a woman's voice and walk, she becomes unstoppable. not because she has never faced opposition, because she no longer walks or speaks on her own authority. She speaks under the covering of heaven, and she walks in the strength of God's promises. No weapon formed against her can prosper because her journey is not fueled by fear, but by faith. Her voice begins to disturb the silence that once held her captive. Where she was once quiet about injustice, she now speaks truth. Where she once silenced herself out of fear of rejection, she now declares her worth boldly. Where she once let others define her, she now defines herself according to the word of God. Her empowered voice breaks cycles, dismantles lies, and sets captives free. Not only herself, those who hear her, and her walk begins to inspire. People watch her steps and see resilience. They see consistency. They see courage. They see faith in motion. She does not even have to explain her testimony. Her life testifies of it. The way she walks through storms with dignity. The way she carries herself in seasons of uncertainty. The way she keeps moving forward when others would have quit. That walk is a sermon without words, a living message that God's power is real. Empowerment from God also gives her discernment in her walk. She no longer chases every opportunity. She moves only in alignment with her purpose. She no longer wastes energy on detours that distract her. She keeps her focus on the path set before her. Each step is intentional. Each move is directed. Each stride is ordered by divine wisdom. She does not rush. She does not lag behind. She walks in perfect timing. Her voice and her walk together create impact. Her voice calls things into being, while her walk demonstrates the reality of what she believes. Her voice speaks faith, and her walk proves faith. Her voice declares freedom, and her walk shows what freedom looks like. Her voice declares victory, and her walk carries the evidence of that victory. She becomes a complete testimony, her words and her actions in harmony, both empowered by God. And when the world sees her, they cannot deny the transformation. They remember the woman who was once quiet, and now they hear the power in her words. They remember the woman who once stumbled. Now they see the strength in her stride. They remember the woman who once lived in the shadows, and now they watch her shine in the light of her calling. She is no longer the same because God has redefined and empowered her. This empowerment does not mean she never feels fear, does not mean she never faces challenges. It means that even in those moments, her voice speaks faith over fear, and her walk continues forward in courage. She does not wait for everything to be perfect before moving. She moves, and perfection unfolds along the journey. She does not wait for approval before speaking. She speaks, and her words shape the atmosphere. Her empowerment also multiplies. When God empowers her, her voice lifts others, and her walk inspires others to rise. Her children begin to speak differently because they hear her faith-filled words. Community begins to walk differently because they watch her consistency. She becomes a ripple effect of empowerment, touching lives she may never fully realize. Her voice echoes in places she may never physically enter, and her walk sets footprints for others to follow. And here is the most beautiful truth. Her empowered voice and walk are not temporary. They are eternal. They are not dependent on circumstances. They are rooted in God's unchanging nature. Seasons may shift, storms may come, but her empowerment remains. Because it is not about her strength, but about His Spirit working through her. So if she has ever felt silenced, if she has ever felt paralyzed, she has ever felt like her words did not matter or her steps had no direction, let her know this God is still in the business of empowerment. He will anoint her voice to speak with authority. He will strengthen her walk to move with purpose. He will give her the courage to stand tall, boldness to declare truth, and the resilience to keep moving forward. Her voice matters. Her steps matter. Her journey matters, and when God empowers them, there is no limit to the impact she will have. Her words will shift atmospheres. Her walk will open doors. Her life will become living proof that God takes the silenced and gives them a sound, takes the hesitant and gives them stride, takes the ordinary and makes them extraordinary. There comes a moment when a woman looks back over her life and realizes that what was meant to destroy her has only made her stronger. The wounds that once bled now shine as scars of survival. The tears that once blurred her vision have watered the soil of her destiny. The nights she thought would never end became the very backdrop against which her dawn appeared. And as she steps into the fullness of who she is, she understands this undeniable truth. Her life has become a testimony. A testimony is not born out of ease. It is not formed in comfort. It is not written in the absence of struggle. A testimony is forged in fire. It comes from the valleys, the wilderness seasons, the moments of brokenness where she felt she had nothing left to give. A testimony is birthed in the tension of trial and triumph, in the intersection of pain and perseverance. And the woman who stands on the other side of her battles does not just stand for herself. She stands as evidence that God is faithful. Her life becomes a testimony not because it has been perfect, but because it has been redeemed. People may know her story, how she was rejected, how she was abandoned, how she was betrayed. They may remember the mistakes she made, the tears she shed, the time she fell. What they cannot deny is that she is still here. And the fact that she survived is her testimony. The fact that she did not give up is her testimony. The fact that she can smile again, love again, believe again, that is the power of her testimony. A testimony is not about impressing others, it is about inspiring others. When she tells her story, it is not to boast about her strength, but to magnify the strength of God that carried her. When people see her resilience, they realize it was not her might that sustained her, but His grace. Her life declares what her words cannot fully capture. Even in the darkest moments, light was still present. That even when she thought it was the end, God was writing a new beginning. Her testimony is not only for herself, it is for those who are still in their valleys, still in their storms, still in their battles. When another woman hears her story, she sees a reflection of hope. She realizes that if God could bring her out, He can do the same for me. Her life becomes a living sermon, a message without a microphone, proof that healing is possible, that joy is possible, that restoration is possible. What is most powerful about her testimony is that it is ongoing. It is not a single moment in the past. It is the unfolding story of her present and future. Every new victory adds a new chapter. Every new step forward adds a new verse. Every day she chooses to keep believing, keep loving, keep rising. She is writing another line in her testimony, and her life continues to echo the truth that nothing is wasted and everything has purpose. Her testimony is not only about what she overcame, but also about who she became in the process. Pain tried to break her, but it birthed strength. Loss tried to silence her, but it gave her voice. Disappointment tried to crush her, but it produced endurance. She is no longer just a woman with a past. She is a woman with a purpose, and her life itself is the evidence of transformation. Testimony also carries authority. When she speaks about endurance, it is not theory, it is experience. When she talks about faith, it is not just words, it is her reality. When she encourages someone not to give up, it is because she knows what it feels like to want to quit. Her voice carries weight because her life backs it up. She does not just tell people what God can do, she embodies what He has already done. And her testimony does not only impact those who hear her story, it impacts the atmosphere around her. People may not know the details, but they feel the power when she enters a room. They sense the peace she carries, the strength she embodies, the light that radiates from her presence. That is the silent testimony of her life, the evidence of grace that cannot be hidden. Her life becoming a testimony does not mean that challenges stop. It does not mean she will never face pain again, but it does mean that whatever she faces will only add more power to her story. Every battle she wins becomes another declaration. Every obstacle she overcomes becomes another chapter. Every storm she survives becomes another verse in the anthem of victory her life sings. A testimony also has ripple effects. Children inherit courage from her story. Her friends draw strength from her journey. Her community is inspired by her resilience. People she may never meet will hear of her testimony and find hope in it. Her life becomes a seed that keeps producing fruit long after she has spoken. In this way, her testimony becomes eternal. It outlives her, continuing to inspire generations to come. Her life as a testimony is also a weapon. The enemy thought that by attacking her, he would silence her. But instead, he gave her a louder story to tell. What was designed to destroy her has become her platform. What was intended to break her has become her strength. What was supposed to end her has only elevated her. Her testimony is proof that darkness does not have the final say, light does. Perhaps the most beautiful part of her testimony is that it belongs uniquely to her. No one else has walked her exact journey. No one else has faced her exact battles. No one else has carried her exact scars. Her testimony is her fingerprint, unrepeatable, undeniable, unforgettable. And because it is hers, it carries a power that cannot be duplicated. So when people look at her now, they may wonder how she did it. How did she survive the heartbreak? How did she endure the loneliness? How did she rise after the fall? And she will smile, not because she has all the answers, because she knows the truth. Her life is not about what she did for herself, but about what God did in her. Her testimony is not a monument to her strength, to His grace. And as she continues to live, she continues to testify, not just with her words, but with her walk, with her resilience, with her joy. Her very existence becomes a declaration of hope. Her life sings a song that says, if He did it for me, He can do it for you. And that is the power of her testimony. It transcends her, reaching into the lives of others, pulling them up from despair and pushing them into destiny. Because in the end, her life is not just a story. It is a testimony, a living, breathing, undeniable proof that grace restores, that love heals, that faith sustains, and that God still writes the most beautiful stories out of the most broken pieces.